Welcome back to the 27th. If you've been waiting patiently for this month's development update as I have, it's a couple of days late, but worth every second. This thing has it all. If you're one of those physics first guys, you're in for a doozy, plus hints at amazing free content as well as an official confirmation for Racing USA Part 2, physics, force feedback, AI, multiplayer rating system, and more. This is a big one, so strap in, starting off with Renato. Greetings everyone, part 2 of our November development update has finally arrived with some fresh, good news for Automobilista 2 in our final development sprint of 2021. And what a run of weeks it has been so far. Not only have we managed to hit some of the important developments we had planned for the month, we also managed to find and are in the process of resolving some other significant issues along the way. In fact, our plan had been to publish this article already with our first big update of November. However, spotting a rather sizable physics issue just a few hours before the update was meant to be deployed has forced us back to the drawing board for a few more days. The new Automobilista version 1.3 update is expected to arrive towards the end of this week. On the plus side, V1.3 will now pack even further value to what was already a landmark update for AMS2, so let's get into some of what we've been working on these past few weeks. And they're starting off with AMS2 demo with VW TSI Cup by Acelerados now available. We know about this. Our collaboration with Volkswagen Brazil and Acelerados channel has come to fruition this past week with the release of the AMS2 demo featuring the new VW TSI Cup, bringing the VW Polo and Virtus production cars to AMS2. More details on this release here. The delay on our new game update unfortunately has meant the addition of these cars to the main game have also been slightly held back. Do look forward to the arrival later this week, however, with the release of V1.3. And then here we go. This is the big stuff now. We're getting right into it. The big physics overhaul of AMS2 version 1.3. As touched upon in part 1 of the development update, physics and force feedback are receiving a pretty substantial overhaul this month, similarly to what happened earlier in the year in the V1.2 dev cycle, maximizing further knowledge of the Madness tire and driveline models we have gathered in the recent months. Beginning with the latest finding, the issue spotted just this weekend forcing the delay of the update is nothing more than a simple syntax error that resulted in some of the tire models in AMS2 using components that didn't belong to them, whatever that means. This error, the type you hope not to spot years into the development of the sim, is nevertheless the type of thing that can happen when you are working on someone else's technology, and part of a learning curve that sometimes can stretch longer than one would have preferred. The silver lining here, of course, is that spotting and correcting this error will lead to even further progress to what was already proving a very extensive revision of all tire models in AMS2, which combined with the driveline developments have already led to all cars driving substantially better than the current release to one degree or the other. On to the driveline development. As with tires, we have been constantly learning more details about the complex driveline system in the Madness engine. A physical model based on masses, friction coefficients, stiffness, and pairings, which if not configured correctly for each car, can easily result in various handling issues. Does that sound like a manufactured driving experience if they're simulating friction coefficients? Alright, continuing. The first major development here is fine-tuning clutch LSD disc friction coefficients to eliminate the infamous quote-unquote sticky behavior of the differential on some cars, which could lead to the car balance suddenly changing mid-corner. The differential operation is much smoother now, remaining closed when it should and opening immediately, and yet gradually based on your effective locking amount from preload, ramp angles, and amount of clutches. It sounds like they've figured out a way to bring the differentials to life. As we've already discussed ad nauseum, the limited slip differentials are complicated in this driveline, and having everything balanced perfectly means a more realistic driving experience, but what you can guarantee is when they're simulating so many different components and they're doing it well, It is the most realistic sim out there. It's definitely not manufactured. These things do take time though, so let's continue. With Renato, the second important improvement was made to the clutch engagement formula itself. Thus far, preload settings and LST diffs had far too much importance, and ramp angles relatively very little. Reason for this laid in a bug in the underlying mathematical formula combining forces from these two set of factors. With a legacy bug corrected, it's been possible and in fact necessary to update all default differential setups to more sensible ones. One neat example is the Caterham clutch LSD that could now get inspiration from the real-life Titan LSD designed for Caterhams. A 30-90 ramp configuration with preload adjusted for each driver's needs. This maintains the Caterham's trademark throttle steer character, while users will remain able to fine-tune preload to adjust their liftoff behavior tastes. Oh, and here's a photo of a Mercedes GT1 next to what looks like a Nissan GT1. I guess we're kind of alluding to something here. Let's continue. Furthermore, on the driveline topic, we have been literally flexing the muscles of the engine by introducing driveline elasticity with multiple moving parts between the engine and driven wheels, each with its own finite stiffness. The forces applied on these parts can be immense as gearboxes multiply engine torque. One can often hear these dynamics at play on real onboard videos as engine noise and transmission whine oscillating as the whole driveline acts like a giant spring under changing loads. We have revised stiffness and drive shaft weights in multiple classes and in multiple points in their drivelines. This creates an immersive and organic effect that fully depends on what is going on in the physical simulation. If you stomp on the throttle in first gear, you will hear revs jump up as the driveline tenses up, lifts suddenly, and the driveline releases its tension audibly. Driving over bumps, the engine and the transmission noises will oscillate smoother than before as the connection between tires, gearbox, and engine isn't as direct. This isn't purely for immersion purposes either, as a slight delay in response between driven wheels and engine can have subtle effects on handling. It means, for example, that tire slip and engine RPM aren't the only buffers for sudden forces, which can also dampen some sharp jolts in the bumpy braking zones. In the video below, comparing a lap with the Mercedes AMG GT3 around Nuremberg in version 1.251 versus the current AMS2 beta overlaid with wheel speed telemetry, you can see and hear the subtle but noticeable results of the developments described above. So here we have an embedded video side by side with the Mercedes AMG on the left and the right, featuring live telemetry. Now, if you're going to watch this, I want you to pay attention to the graphs themselves. There's going to be the green on the left and the red on the right. What you're looking for is the brighter parts when they're coming into the coast ramp phase, when they're slowing down and cornering. If you see a brighter part of the line, of the bar that's growing as the telemetry proceeds, that means the differential is opening more gradually, whereas a shorter bright line in the green, that means the differential is kind of opening suddenly or in less amount of time. So on the right, you'll see a lot more smoothness in the car's differential, and therefore you can see the cornering characteristics unfold before your eyes. Continuing, all of these substantial physics developments, along with some adjustments in setup options, have also led to a big revision of default setups on all cars. Great. So further good news is default setups being as reasonably well adjusted as they can possibly be as universal baselines for all tracks and controller types. This means you can log into the game, pick a car, and the default setup will work reasonably good for you. No need to look up a small obscure YouTube channel to try to find the default setup that works better. That's all good news for everybody. Continuing, it does also mean, however, it will be critical to reset all your setups one more time upon deployment of the next update. Failure to do could result in some very odd setups that will most definitely spoil the car's handling. A small price to pay, hopefully, for what is all around a really big step in the AMS2 driving experience. While physics development remains an ongoing process for anyone serious about simulation, in V1.3, the physics will have reached a level of maturity that we are confident to represent our very best work in this area to date. On a side note, guys, there's a lot of talk about having to reset the entire document 2 folder. That's not necessarily the case. What we're talking about is the setup, the tuning setups folder. And I plan to release a video that'll show you step by step of how to get there and what to delete and what you can keep. There's a lot of stuff you can keep. Your settings, your graphic settings, your controller settings, everything can be kept. Just the default setups, and I'll show you how to do it. Look forward to a future video. Moving on to force feedback developments in AMS2 v1.3. AMS2 v1.3 will also introduce developments in the game force feedback with the addition of a new default plus profile parallel to the existing default. Force feedback can be a somewhat subjective matter. Ain't that the truth? While generally steering force feedback in-game should resemble certain traits from real-world vehicles, self-centering steering wheel, resistance buildup, and more steering angle and ramp-up forces with tire load, in race sims this is somewhat restrictive and often leaves us missing the actual feedback we get in our bodies on a real car through its lateral and longitudinal acceleration. Through force feedback, one hopes to convey some of that mixed in with the usual steering forces, and the way to do that is where things get subjective. With the new default plus profile, we have what we believe to be a good compromise, adding further useful information to what you get on the default profile. Aside from additional info provided in default plus, we also did a lot of work on damping, which is inherent to any steering system and something we strongly advise to be used to some degree, as it now doesn't take anything away from the feedback. Instead, works in sync with the vehicle you drive. It depends not just on steering velocity, but vehicle velocity, lateral acceleration, tire slip, oversteer. All of that is taken into account on damping, so it is usable and helpful instead of simply providing viscous-like resistance to wheel turning. While the default plus is given force feedback subjectivity to taste, the usage of custom force feedback profiles will remain an option, with some interesting and popular work being developed, in part, I should say, by Karsten Vidberg and company you may also want to check out. We had in fact planned to add one of these profiles as a third default option in the game. However, we found out that the memory load from the force feedback system is raised considerably by its presence if there is another profile present in the custom slot, leading to glitches. So there's no 2 custom slots apparently. We do encourage our users who may still be looking for something beyond what our default profiles are offering to give these a try, checking out the Automobilista 2 custom force feedback overview and recommendations thread. I highly recommend it as well. AI development AMS2 version 1.3. Here we go. AMS2 1.3 will bring yet another big step for the AI, with an extensive calibration pass to not only match recent player physics development, but also solving several track and car specific performance discrepancies from the current release. Driver personalities have been extended, with some initial parameters defining an AI driver's ability to manage tire wear, racing in wet weather, and cooperating with blue flags. Furthermore, version 1.3 will introduce the option to mod AI drivers' names, livery assignments, and personalities. You can read more about this new feature on this topic, move from the beta subforum, for those looking to get an early understanding of how to go about it. And to put it simply, this is amazing, immersive for custom championships. You can quite literally simulate now previous real-life racing series with real names, downloading a livery from, say, the race department or somewhere. Highly immersive, amazing. Let's move on to the next big hitter, multiplayer rating system hitting public beta in v1.3. Last but not least, in our big list of v1.3 features is the introduction of the driver profile page alongside the long-awaited multiplayer rating system, albeit in beta stage in its initial release. The system is heavily based on the legacy system featured in Project Cars 2, with several adjustments. More details about it to be shared in a dedicated thread shortly before release. And here's a screenshot of what looks like the profile page, where you have stats, content, and replay, but more importantly, the stats. You can see all your starts, all your poles, all your wins, how many DQs, how many races you didn't finish, how much you spend in racing, qualifying, engineering, offline, time trial, and down at the bottom right, zoom in there, there's a recent history where you can keep track of your driver rating, and it keeps track of your safety, it keeps track of what experience you have. This is very similar to Project Cars 2, I must admit, and this will give multiplayer lobby creators or hosts the ability to basically filter out the quality of drivers that they want. As the multiplayer system grows and more people participate, this could really be a great thing, lead to some really challenging races. If you want to just pick up a race here and there and take the risk of going in against some, rather inexperienced drivers and stay out front, you can do that as well. We're also working with third-party multiplayer services to best integrate our system with theirs, which should hopefully see the arrival of organized scheduled races in AMS2 in the not-so-distant future. Wow, organized scheduled races. Okay, so rolling scheduled races. That's amazing. Furthermore, we also have been collecting some valuable feedback from the community for further multiplayer development, some of which we are pushing to deliver as we progress through the public beta of the multiplayer rating system. Not everything will arrive in a matter of weeks, but we do hope to be fulfilling at least some common requests in the near future. And there's been some talk about, net coding and issues with people being disconnected and all of the other things that can go wrong. Host and league organizer controls, things like this. All of these things are not off the board. It's just a matter of time and effort and how much work it takes to implement, guys. This is just the tip of the iceberg. But let's move into the final bit of this review, and that is the big one: Racing USA Part 2. As previously announced, the second part of the Racing USA expansion pack is due to be released shortly after version 1.3 and before the end of this month. Okay, so sooner rather than later. This time we will explore what many consider to be the golden years of American single-seater racing, as Racing USA Part 2 will feature a number of Reynolds, Swifts, and Lola Indy cars and Champ cars from the 1990s, along with 3 iconic road courses. The cars will make up what we'll call Formula USA in the game in 3 generations. Gen 1 will feature models from the 1995 IndyCar season, the last before the series infamously split. Gen 2 will have models from the 1998 season when Alex Zanardi reigned supreme, with Gen 3 featuring models from 2000, the performance peak of the Champ Car era, enabling historical feats such as Gilda Ferrand's closed course record average speed. The 3 tracks, here we go, the 3 tracks to feature in the pack will be Watkins Glen, of course, which, even though was not raced by these cars during the 90s, is still one of the greatest road courses in the USA, fully warranting its place in the pack. The unique Cleveland temporary road course set on the Burke Lakefront Airport with a fast-flowing and very bumpy layout serving as stage for some memorable wheel-to-wheel battles. And the third one remaining under wraps for a few more days as we finalize some licensing requirements. Okay, so there's Watkins Glen, Cleveland, and X. We don't know what the third one is. I wonder what it could be. Racing USA Part 2 itself will be slightly staggered release. The Gen 2 cars alongside with Cleveland and Watkins Glen will be released at the end of this month, with the remaining models and the third track arriving just before our Christmas wrap-up. There will be further additions to this pack later on in 2022, as the arrival of Racing USA Part 3 will introduce oval tracks to Automobilista 2 ovals, which will see all Formula USA models in Part 2 receiving their oval spec variants. Okay, that's amazing. So we're not getting just one car, we're getting 2 cars, a road course variant and an oval spec variant. This is one of the most exciting things that I've heard of in a long time. While Part 3 of Racing USA will take a bit longer than originally planned into 2022, the delay will see more tracks being added to the package than originally planned. Wow, more. At no extra expense for those who already bought the full Racing USA expansion pack. The price for Racing USA Part 2 will be the same as Part 1 in your local currency. And then finally we have the free content, and lo and behold, look at that. That looks like a Group C Nissan to me. Amazing. New manufacturers joining the party. We are happy to confirm we're in the final stages of licensing arrangements with Nissan, which should see several models from the brand coming to Automobilista 2, if not already on version 1.3 very soon after. There are at least 2 more major manufacturer deals we are looking to wrap before the end of the year, all of which leading to various existing classes in the game being expanded with new competitors over the course of 2022. Watch this space. This covers the main topics we had to bring you on this development update. Even if not quite all we have in store for the remainder of the year, we will cover these remaining goodies in our final development update of the year early in December, by which time you will all hopefully already be enjoying AMS2 version 1.3 and Racing USA Part 2. So let's take a look at some of the photos, and here is a fantastic picture of what appears to be the Nissan GT1. They did mention 2 other major manufacturers besides Nissan. Scrolling up, here's the Group C Nissan we mentioned before. That looks so great. Can't wait to get my hands on that. And then above it, we have what appears to be one of the, Formula USA Kart Championship recreations. That looks fantastic. I really can't wait to drive these things on Watkins Glen and Laguna Seca. And here's some more pictures of some champ cars, probably recognizable to most of you. And then scrolling all the way up at the top, we have GT1s, the Nissan, and the Merc. Fantastic. The Volkswagen Accelerados TSI. And then finally another picture of champ car. So that's the November development update part 2. I wanted to thank you for sticking around, but right now all we can do is wait for the end of the month. Anything that comes through, you know where to find me. We're going to be covering it. In the meantime, thanks for watching and take care.